Hi guys, I'm Karan Gokani from Hopper's Restaurants in London. It's always been a restaurant that's inspired by Sri Lankan and South Indian food as opposed to being authentic, rigid Sri Lankan food. So one of the dishes and one of the ingredients that totally blew me away is Maldive fish, very much like katsuobushi in Japan. So I've got a little range of it. This is a traditional Sri Lankan Moldy fish chips, which have been decanted from that jar. This is how it's usually sold. I've then got a variety of Japanese dried fish. So you've got the bonito over there, which is also known as katsuobushi. It's used in stocks, it's used in soups. You've then got a different version of that, very similar, just shaved differently, both made from bonito. And then you've got a yellowfin tuna, which has been flaked in these beautiful sort of dancing fish flakes, which you see in a lot of Japanese food. This one is a skipjack tuna, so typically sort of 3 fish from the same family. Interestingly, that Maldive fish the bonito was often exported from the Maldives to Japan and to Sri Lanka. So there's a very close connection there. And when we first got talking about, recipes and ideas for this and thinking of umami-rich and umami-packed food, this just came as such an obvious answer because it's so commonly used in relishes in Sri Lanka. I use it in salads. I even shave some in curries just for that extra boost because if you're not using a stock or fish stock, this just creates that stock in no time. Back to Moldy fish, how it's made. They boil it. You get the tuna, the fresh tuna. You boil it often with spices like turmeric, sometimes with goraka, which is a dried berry. A little bit of salt in there. Boil it, remove it, and then you just sun dry it for a long time. Sometimes it's smoked mildly, so just dried over a kiln or something. And then once it's fully dry and it's hardened and reduced in size, it's then chopped up into pieces and sold either as pieces, but more commonly as flakes. So there you go. I've got my ingredients here for today's dish, the pole sambal, different kinds of moldy fish. I'm obviously going to use the Sri Lankan version here. Grated coconut. So in this country, I tend to use frozen because it's a little more consistent, but if you can find the right coconuts, it's the dry brown coconut. So it's quite different from the green one. You sort of picture yourself lying under a palm tree and sipping away. Onions, I use Thai shallots when I'm making this at home or at the restaurant. You could use red onion or you could use banana shallots. In India and in Sri Lanka, we have something called Bombay or Indian onions, which are somewhere between a red onion and a brown onion. Not always easy to find in the UK, so I use shallots, which are quite similar and nice and pungent. Sea salt, or just sort of fine salt. I've used Maldon over here. Lime, much nicer than lemon. I'm just going to cut that up and squeeze some in here. And then chili flakes. So a chili is not always just a chili. A chili can be very, very different. And this, interestingly, is a dried chili. In Sri Lanka, they call them chili pieces. Basically look for the brightest, freshest dried chili flakes. Italian could do. If you've got chilies at home, just de-seed them and then flake them up a little bit. So there you go. Very, very simple dish. Just literally 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and moldy fish, 6 ingredients. Pol sambal is part of every single Sri Lankan meal you would eat, or at least most of them. And it's just one of those simple dishes that just have that amazing impact when you go ahead and make it and eat it. So now for the recipe. Pol sambal, again, one of my favorite relishes, super easy to make. It's just, important thing is just to have fresh ingredients and just have them all prepared and ready. You're just gonna go in, bash it. There's no cooking involved. So I usually start off with those Sri Lankan moldy fish. Very, very hard, especially the store-bought stuff is almost like stone. So you want to grind it down quite a lot. I'm fairly generous with this. If you're making this for the first time, try and go slightly on the lighter side because you might or might not like that, that rich, umami-rich flavor of moldy fish. It's like eating Marmite with a spoonful. Just gonna go and break that up a little bit. Again, having a pestle and mortar is great because that's how it's traditionally done. You wanna break the ingredients and you want to sort of bash them as opposed to chopping them up. So you could use a food processor, but it's just not going to give you the same thing because I find that if you were to food process that, you'd get slices and little sort of minute pieces of it, but they'll never really meld together. Whereas if you go bashing it, you're breaking up the cells and you're releasing all those flavors and everything sort of coming together. So for me, when I cook Thai food, I learned this from, Thai chef friends. You use a pestle and mortar to make your paste. Obviously, if you're lazy, just buy them and leave them in the fridge. Many of them are great. There we go. Now I'm fairly happy with that. It's not going to break down to a powder. You're going to have this sort of flaky texture on it. You will get a few chunks, but these are no problem. You will sort of chew into them, you'll bite them, and as you chew into them, there's more and more of that umami flavor that'll get released. My Sri Lankan chili flakes, a really beautiful, fresh, bright Sri Lankan chili. Like I said, this smells of mangoes. It's bizarre. I've never smelled chili like this, and I'm so excited to actually try this pol sambal. So go fairly heavy on that because that's going to give you that flavor. It's going to give you that beautiful bright red color. Again, just sort of bash it about a little bit. You're breaking the cells up to release some of that flavor. Salt, I love sea salt, nice coarse salt, because again, it sort of helps you grind and brings everything together. We can always add a little more at the end, so don't go too heavy on that because you can't take it out. Then once you've done that, your shallots. Thigh shallots in this case, bash it up. Then be careful doing this because sometimes when you go in with your wet ingredients and they get overzealous, you might just get a little spray back into your eye. It's happened to all of us. Other thing to remember, obviously, is wash your hands after you're done with this, especially if you're a guy. So what you're looking to do here is just break these onions up, release their flavors. You're not going to make a paste of it. Then I'm going to go in with a little bit of that lime. Help it all come together. You're not looking for a paste, but you're looking for, a little bit of texture, few pulpy bits, few bits that are still quite coarse. Because it is effectively a very, very simple dish. But that's why it's more important that you get the texture right, you get the ingredients right, because there's nothing to really hide behind. Lime and salt is something that you could also, dress with at the end. So I'm happy with that texture. I'm going to slowly add my coconut in. You don't need to bash it a huge amount once the coconut's in there. About 2 parts coconut to 1 part onions. Chili, depending on how spicy the chili is. It should really look nice and orange and red as it is now. Just give it a little bit of a bash there. That's the hard work done. Everything's mixed through. I can see pieces of the moldy fish, still chunks of the onion. The salt and the lime is all sort of melted in with the coconut. For me, that's perfect. Get the hit of spice. I get the beautiful, rich umami flavor. It's nice and sour and the right amount of salt. Again, you need to be slightly higher on the salt content just because of all those cool flavors in there. So that's my pol sambal made with moldy fish, umami rich, beautiful, sour, salty, spicy, just beautiful, lovely relish. I hope you enjoy it.